Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this Unify webinar about providing business logic with .NET Web Services from Team Developer. I'm your host, Martin Teetz, and I'm also the speaker for this webinar. First, let me go through a few things about Unify. Unify is more than 30 years in the business of development tools and database products. We have created a number of industry-first products like the data server, the first Unix SQL database, Excel, which was the first Unix 4GL programming language or programming environment, SQL Base, the first DOS and Windows SQL database. SQL Windows was the first Windows 4GL, and Team Developer, the first Windows 32-bit 4GL. And today we are all going to talk all about Team Developer. About Unify, we are not only doing databases and development tools, we also have an archiving unit called Access One. We have the Dages e-discovery solutions group that you can use to have your e-discovery done. We offer Oracle Forms to Java migration and Lotus Notes to .NET migration. If you are interested in that, please go to our website and find out the details about those. I'm a Unify product manager for more than 10 years, and I basically create the product plans for Team Developer, SQL Base, Excel, Data Server, and NXJ. So we are talking about TD 6.1 today, and what are the general benefits of TD 6.1. TD 6.1 brings a new high productivity IDE to you. It brings new enhanced high usability GUI controls and powerful new .NET integration. So you can leverage investments into the Team Developer code that you created in the past and other .NET code that has been created maybe using Visual Studio and C#. And Team Developer is a perfect platform to include both these investments and create great new solutions. The agenda today, I will talk a bit about Web Services basics, about Microsoft ASP.NET Web Services, about creating Team Developer Web Services, about exception handling in web services, about deploying Team Developer Web Services on IIS, about web services testing. I will do a demonstration of all these things so you can see how that works live. And we will have a questions and answer session. For the questions and answer session, I would like you to put the questions into the WebEx question tool so I can answer them all at the end of the webinar. Thank you. So, Web Services basics. A method of communication between two electronic devices over a network. Typically uses the SOAP, Simple Access Protocol messages. It exchanges structured information over a network. The data is being format, and the message transfer is done using HTTP Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Web services are described in a description document that is in XML format as well, called the WSDL, Whistle Web Service Description Language. And web services are based on proven technologies like XML and the ubiquitous HTTP protocol, so they are pretty much at the core of every operating system and platform that you will be using in your enterprise or in your life, really, because even smartphones do support calling web services. Microsoft ASP.NET Web Services. That's the underlying technology we are using for Team Developer Web Services on .NET. It is a component of ASP.NET, of the ASP.NET Web Application Framework. It's built on the Common Language Runtime, the CLR, and coding is done via .NET languages, so of course you can use Team Developer SAL with TD 6.1 to write web services. Internally, the ASP.NET Web Service use the .NET Framework classes XML serializer to serialize and deserialize data, and the .NET SOAP extensions classes allow ASP.NET components to process SOAP messages. So it's all built into the .NET Framework, and this is all background information for you. You don't really need to know that, but just so you know what we are using. And at the end, a web service provider is compiled into a class library assembly, which is basically a DLL. And the service itself then is exposed through the .asmx handler, which is a .asmx file, which provides the WSDL interface for the consuming application and the browser testing interface. So TD 6.1 allows creating web service using ASP.NET. Now, how do you create team developer web services? In TD 6.1, you have new classes called web services, and these web services, as you can see on the screenshot, do have functions and operations. In this case, there's a number of operations, which are basically functions that you can provide to the public via a web service. And all these operations are being published to the outside via this WSDL file. And so consumers can read the WSDL and know how to talk to these operations that you created with Team Developer. Now, the simplest way is to talk to these functions is to use a browser interface, the ASMX handler that I mentioned before. If you open the ASMX file from a browser, you get the list of operations the web service provides, and from that you can do some testing of the web service, some initial testing, see if it works. You can even test all the web services that you have to see if they're working and doing what you think. And then, of course, you can have client applications. In this case, this would be a Team Developer web service client application that calls web services that have been created in TD. And I will show you exactly that sample later. And with web service, of course, you can have other clients that run in other operating environments, like, for example, Android. In this case, the screenshot is an Android emulator running an Android application that calls these web services created with Team Developer. So basically, web services open up your business logic, and you can use them from TD applications, from HTML, ASP.NET applications, from smartphone, iOS, Android applications, and of course, tablet applications, if you like. In TD.NET, there's a new web service build target. The first thing is you create a new Team Developer application, and then select the new build target .NET Web Service DLL. And if you do that, then it will create that DLL. And if in the target name you specify the deployment directory, in this case you see that path there, inetpub www root. That means in this case the developer has already put in the internet information server path where he wants to publish his web service. Maybe this is for local testing only, but you know that every Windows license basically has IIS, Internet Information Server, included, and you can enable that and do some nice testing of your web service on your own machine, really. So how do you implement business logic with TD 6.1 web services? There's a new outline class called a web services class, similar to a functional class, except no class and instance variables are present and can be used. You can have one or more web service classes. You can implement one or more operations per web service class. As you can see on the right there's multiple operations for every of the web service classes. You can implement functions local to the class. These functions are not exposed to the consumer of the web service. They are just internally for you, so you can structure your code nicely. Operations can, of course, call other operations. And operations can call functions local to the class or TD internal functions. So if you have internal global functions in your web service app, then you can, of course, call these from your web services. The web service class can derive from other non-UI or COM class types. It can derive from functional class and other web service class. Web services can use global variables, instance variables of TD functional classes or assemblies. And any available SAL or SQL functions that access SAL files or any .NET assemblies as long as there is no user interface involved. So user input will block the process. Basically, you can do everything that is involved with business logic, accessing the database, writing things to files, if you like, accessing email, things like that, but without providing a user interface. If you compile web services, it generates the .NET Web Service DLL of the given name and, of course, of the given path in the build settings. And the web service class will be exposed in the ASMX handler, which exposes the WSDL, and that includes the port name, the address location of the web service, bindings, operations, complex type definitions, and the endpoint, which is necessary for communication, but really nothing you need to understand in detail, but just you need to know how to get, if you create a TD client application that consumes web service, you need to know how to get to the WSDL file to create your consuming application. IIS deployment. You need to deploy your .asmx file to a directory below the INET pub. So inside the directory structure of Internet Information Server, you create basically a new directory there below www root. And there you do put the .asmx file that you created, or that has been created when you compiled the web service app. The DLL that has been created when you compiled the web service app needs to go in a subdirectory called bin from that location. So you basically have the ASMX and then the subdirectory bin where you put that DLL plus all the other dependent files that that DLL calls. So if you're calling other .NET assemblies, classes, then you need to put all these DLLs into the bin directory for the application to be able to access those. So a bit of background information about what to do with IIS to get all this working. I told you before that Windows comes with IIS included. You might need to turn the features on in your control panel, turn Windows features on or off. You need to switch on all the ASP features and all the IIS features to make this work. Also select security if you want to play with HTTPS security, for example. And then, if you have done that, if IIS is up and running and you can start the INET Manager, which is the management console of Internet Information Server, you basically have a tree in there of the directory structure of your website, and in that tree, select the directory that contains your web service and do a right click on that one and then convert that directory to an application. So IIS knows that this is not HTML content in there, but application things, and sets the right security and access rights for web services. Another thing is the Web.config file. If you have a local machine, you might not have a root Web.config file, but if you have a larger website where you want to deploy these web services, you probably have a root Web.config file that is being used by your webmaster to define the details of your website. You should really care about the application Web.config file, which is optional but helps you to set up team developer web services quite nicely. So there's two things you can do there, and one thing is the .asmx testing. By default, .asmx testing, which means that you open the browser and access the web services you have created using the browser interface. That only works on your local machine. You cannot do that accessing a remote machine. If you want to enable that, you can add the code to the right. Under protocols, add name HTTP GET, HTTP POST. That means that then IIS allows to do remote testing of the web service, which is nice, of course, when you deploy your web service to a remote IIS server. And another thing you need to provide is if you use SQL-Base, you need to specify the path of the SQL-Base API using the add key values that you see below there, TD installation directory and TD SQL INI file, and those will be used to connect to the database when your web service is running. And I will show you that. I have all that available on my local machine, of course. Exception handling. In TD 6.1, we introduced a new concept of .NET exception handling, which is called when exception and end exception. This allows you to trap any exception and act on the exception. You can either ignore, swallow the exception, or handle it. The usage is similar to when SQL error, and it acts like a .NET try catch. This is really for the C# developers. I don't need to get into details here. And if you talk about SOAP exceptions, exceptions in web services are thrown as SOAP exceptions to the client. So any code inside the web service that throws an exception, and if the exception is not handled by the web service, it is thrown to the client application. And the client application receives a SOAP exception then. No exception is returned if when SQL error handling is present. So in your web service code, you should be doing when SQL error handling. For example, when SQL error, then get the error text and pass back the error text to the client, or return the error number to the client using the SOAP exception call, the new SOAP exception call that we implemented through SOAP fault. And that passes a string where you can return the error text, for example. So SAL function, SAL throw SOAP fault, allows you to throw a SOAP fault to the client, which is also handy for debugging because then you know what's going on in the web service. And here we are with debugging web service testing. Debugging web services. Use the ASMX file to test methods with primitive data types. So if you have web services that have parameters and return strings, numbers, dates, then this is nice. The ASMX handler does not work for complex data types like UDVs and arrays of UDVs. So in your web service, always handle exceptions and SQL errors. And when you return a SOAP exception in your web service code, then you can see that in the ASMX testing. Again, no user interface is allowed in web services, so you cannot do something like SAL message box and tell them, do some debugging using SAL message box. You should use SAL trace and write to the Windows event log really, and then see what's going on. Some background information about ASP.NET and IIS app recycling, which is quite handy. And I must say the implementation of IIS and .NET is very nice and easy for developers here. If you create a new version of your web service DLL, you can simply copy that DLL over, and the web service is being rebuilt on the fly by IIS. There's no need to bring down IIS and restart it. Just on the fly, you copy over the new DLL, and that new code will be available to users immediately. So quite nice infrastructure there from the .NET side. More web services testing. The ASMX handler allows you to test operations with primitive data types as parameters. It shows you the SOAP request response. So if you click on one of the operations, you are asked if that web service has a parameter. You're asked to provide that parameter, and then you can press the invoke button, and you get a new open tab that shows the result of that web service and shows you the parameter, or shows you the return values from that web service. The testing URL is like this. So your host name, then the directory of your web service, and then the web service name .asmx, and that will open what you see to the right, the basically web page that lists all the operations that one web service provides. So here, let's do the first demonstration with the Friends web service. So I do have some code here, and I open TD 6.1. Let me show you that code. And you see that I have a web service class, my web service. In that class, I do have functions and operations. Remember, functions are internal only. They can be called from operations, but web service consumers do not see the functions here. So in that function that is called internal processing, I'm just setting the database variables to be able to access the island database here. And then the operation, there's only one operation, which is my friends, which returns a string of friends. And there's some local variables like a SQL handle, all the variables I need to create a set of friends. And in the code of the web service, I basically call my web service internal function. Then I connect to the database. If not, I return connect failed. So, this is basically the lowest level of debugging that you can do. And then, if you look at the ASMX results, then you would see that the connect failed if the SQL base isn't available. So, call SQL prepare. I select the email address of my friends from the contact table, and in a loop, I do append all these into the sFriends variable. And at the end, I do return the sFriends to the caller, which basically is the return value from the web service operation. So that's all I'm doing. And I do already have this web service set up on my IIS. Close that here and go to File Manager. What's the other one? So here you go. It's on my machine directory inetpub www root. Then in web services and my web services friends, so I have two subdirectories here. In the friends subdirectory, I have the mywebservice.asmx file, which has been created when I did compile my web service app. I do have a Web.config file that contains the important things, the key TD installation directory and TD SQL INI file. Those are very important. If you don't have those, your web service probably won't connect to SQL base, and you would see that error string there that the connect failed if you try it. And in the bin directory, I do have the web service DLL that has been compiled. So now let's go to Internet Explorer and call this web service, So I can just call this web service and it returns all the email addresses of all my friends. So you see the ASMX page here, and then it opens a new tab with the results from the web service. So I'm really not happy with my web service because I really want to create a more complicated web service, and let me change that web service a little bit. What I want to do is I actually want to pass a value to the web service that then allows me to search for certain friends in my database. For example, I want to have back all friends with last name equals like M. So what I do is I need to pass a parameter to this operation. At next level, a string, and let's call that S last name. And then what I do is I modify my SQL statement, because now I do also need to specify a where clause. Where cont last name like colon S last name. So this should be everything I need to do to change my application to now obtain an input parameter to the web service and then only return the contact names that I want here. So let me save this example, save as. Replace this one here, my web service with parameter. So now saving that to my disk. And now I can build this new my web service DLL. It's compiling the IL and everything, and now if I go into that directory, I really should have that. As you see, there's a new ASMX file and a new DLL, my web service with parameter.dll. So now I need to copy this DLL here and deploy that manually in the bin directory. And then in the friends directory, I need to copy over the new ISMX file that now includes the parameter to my updated web service here. Replace. Okay. And now if I go to IIS, reload this here, my friends, and now you see that it knows that there is a parameter for that web service now. So my change is available already, and I can search for all friends that have a last name that start with M, execute it, and you see I get a string back with all my with the email addresses of all my friends that do have a last name starting with M. So this is a first example of how you can create and deploy team developer web services. So let's go back here to the presentation. The next step really is another presentation and a demonstration, which is this TD World Factbook web service. Now, in this presentation, I have created a slightly more complicated environment. Actually, I'm really using the World Wide Web and using remote web service access here. I'm doing this demonstration here from Munich in Germany, and my machine is here in Munich, Germany, and I'm going to access web services that have been deployed on a machine in Roseville, California, so covering half of the world here to access those web services. And the World Factbook web service basically is a web service, a series of web service operations that allow to retrieve country information from a CIA website that describes that has available data about many countries in the world, probably all countries in the world, like flags, geography, location on Earth, some images, and details about every country. This information is stored in a database in Roseville, and I will be using a web service to retrieve that data on my local machine. And those web services have a number of things in them. They use XPath, system.reg.x, so a number of back-end processing, including calls to the .NET framework, calls to SQL base, and it could even do offline data access by accessing the CIA website directly and retrieving the data from HTML pages instead of going through the database. So what I'm going to do first here is show you the team developer code of the web service that are available remotely. So what you see here is that this application has global internal functions, check SQL base process and connect, for example, check SQL base process, basically checks if there is a Windows process available that is called dbntserv, so it checks if that SQL base is running in this case. And if you look at the classes, then the World Factbook TD Web Service class has all the operations like get all countries, a list of countries, and you see that select count from country into n. Else, if that doesn't so basically, if there are no countries, then it goes to directly to the CIA website, as you see here, and that's using the .NET framework to do that. But if we are connected to the database, so if be connected, then we are selecting the country names into the S country and retrieving a list of all countries, and that's what you see then in the application, that it retrieves a list of countries. Get country by code, we will execute that one. Returns a string, parameters, string, region, and if connected, then it selects the region from country. So basically, you pass a country code like US or GM for Germany, and it will return the region that country is in, like Europe or Northern America. Then there's this guy here which checks if SQL-base is running, and in these actions, it actually returns check SQL-base process, and check SQL-base process is an internal function. So you see, you can call global internal functions from inside web service operations. And then you have those methods here, get country map, which basically returns a binary, the image of the map of the country. Country locator map is a level above that, which displays the map of the country in the context of the countries that are bordering with that country. Get country flag returns the flag of the country. So a lot of image information is actually being retrieved using these web services here. So, as I told you, those web services are deployed on a server in Roseville, California. And let me show you, I do have a remote desktop into that server here. And what you can see is that there's a SQL-base running, and you will be seeing SQL-base doing work while we were calling the remote web services. So let me first open again the Internet Explorer and go to the ASMX handler. And what you see now is that the URL is not localhost, but it is a true URL on the World Wide Web that points to the web services that are deployed in California here. Now, what I can do now is, for example, get country code. I will test operations of this web service. Now, let me reduce the size of Internet Explorer here so we can see SQL-base working in the background. As country, so let's say we are looking for United States. And if you invoke that, then a new tab opens, and you see it returns US for the country. And you also saw that, here you see that on the remote desktop, that it did select ID from country where country name equals. So exactly what I executed has been executed on that server, but it has not gone through the SQL-base API, but has gone through this web service, of course. So let me go back here. So get region by code. So now we know that US is for the United States. And if I invoke that one, then you again see activity on the web, on the SQL-base server, on the remote SQL-base server, and the web service returns North America. So United States is part of the region North America, which seems to be right to me. And then we could also go into get country flag. Okay, this one not. Get country code. So, and what you get back here is binary data, which is basically the map of the country. So you see the data type base64 binary, and this then will be imported in, or will be read by the TD web service, and you can then basically display the picture of the map in your application. But you can test this easily in using the ASMX browser interface. So, okay, so this is the browser interface. You can use this for testing your applications, but then you can, of course, also create team developer applications that access those web services. And I want to show you the client application now, the World Factbook client, which is a TD application that calls these web services that you see running in the background here. Now let me compile. I won't show you the code because the consuming web services will be our next webinar in December. But you will see that it gets the list of countries. So that's the first call. Now let's just bring the SQL-base there up again, so you can see that it's doing things. So if I click on a country now, for example Australia, then it retrieves all the information about Australia, and you see all that flags, maps are being pulled via the web service, and SQL-base is providing that data to the web services back there in California. And you see that, it's even pulling out, kind of touristic information about Australia here. So you can see things about Australia, so pretty detailed information if you want to get a quick overlook about a certain country, which the CIA probably needs to know because they get involved with many countries. So if you look at Greece, you see again in the back end the processing occurring, and the web services are returning the data for Greece, including the flag of Greece, the country code of Greece, the short code, and all the other information here. So this is how a web service consuming application accessing remotely deployed web services. Okay, so this is really what I wanted to show you, how web services do work. Now, question and answers. I do have a question here, and that is, what's the difference between functions and operations in TD web service? The difference between functions and operations is that the operations are the ones that get published to the outside, which are then part of the WSDL file. Let me do one thing that I didn't show you, I think, which is looking at the WSDL of a web service using the ASMX handler. Increase that a bit again. And if you do a question mark WSDL on the ASMX, then you get back the WSDL. And this is the definition of a web service. You don't need to understand that, but you need to be able to get the URL of this and you put that into the consumer application to be able to call this web service. And functions will not show up in this WSDL. The functions are only for your internal processing and creating nicely structured code, but they will not show up in web service, and not in this one here, and also not on the basic ASMX page, which shows all the operations the web service supports. Functions will not show up on this one here. All right. If there are no further questions, I thank you very much for attending this webinar, and I look forward to talking to you soon in December. Thank you and goodbye.